Another one of our top stories today, hundreds of Canadians who want to escape the fighting in Sudan face a new challenge. Canadian rescue flights are over. Now their only way out is a risky journey to reach evacuation ships. Thousands of people have been trekking to Port Sudan on the Red Sea, more than 800 kilometers from the capital. An official with Global Affairs says that journey can take as long as 30 hours. Canadian officials say about 385 Canadians and permanent residents have been airlifted out of Sudan on evacuation flights. And we may hear more today on the Canadian operation from Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly, who's in Kenya.
Good to see you.
And that is where we find our David Common. He's in Nairobi. David, tell us more about Joly's mission there.
Well, Arti, it was just steps away from where I'm speaking with you now that the Foreign Affairs Minister, who'd come from Canada, met with, among others, Kenyan officials, United Nations officials, looking at this burgeoning humanitarian disaster in and around Sudan, because, of course, it's not just an issue in Sudan, but as tens of thousands flee that country, especially now that those airlifts are over. We're looking at refugee camps forming in border areas within Sudan itself, people fleeing internally, but that there is a hunger crisis, a fuel crisis that's accompanying the violence, which in spite of ceasefire agreements has continued. There have been airstrikes continuing in that capital of Khartoum. And so Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly speaking to officials here in part to try to support African efforts to find some way to end that violence, to put the two parties in front of a negotiating table, something they have not done to this point, but also looking at that humanitarian side, what Canada might do to assist in this region. We had the opportunity to catch up with the Foreign Affairs Minister in between some of her meetings, and she spoke about that burgeoning crisis.
If we don't find a peaceful solution quickly, we know this could become one of the worst humanitarian crises in decades here in the eastern part of Africa.
I mean, just consider 46 million people in Sudan, many trapped in their homes still. Many others have made that perilous journey if they can find a way out. People taking buses, taking their own cars, siphoning gas, getting to wherever they can. And one key exit route to this point is Port Sudan, a city which is seeing some violence, but less than has been seen in other areas of the country, and where ships have been able to get in, ships like Saudi military vessels. There are two Canadian warships from the Royal Canadian Navy in that area. They're providing security and logistical experience, not necessarily embarking or bringing passengers on board, but there are also commercial ferries that are crossing the water and bringing people into Saudi Arabia. So it gives you a sense of the evacuations continuing in spite of the airlifts ending, Arti.
And David, we also know that the Canadian rescue operation is now shifting, as you mentioned, to Port Sudan on the Red Sea. So what are we hearing from Canadian officials?
So the efforts to support that continue. We do know that the U.S. military was, over the course of the weekend, able to organize a convoy, 30-hour drive, as you've noted, from Khartoum, if everything goes well, to get to that port city. Now, we know that some Canadians have been part of other convoys, and there are efforts to support new ones if it's possible. That does seem to be the evacuation route at this point. Canadian officials saying there are at least 200 Canadians who have registered, who've said, I want help getting out, who have not been able to get out to this point. And even among those who have been able to get out, you know, they've only been able to get out perhaps to that small country of Djibouti, perhaps by aircraft. Some are ending up here in Kenya, others to bordering states like Chad or Egypt. And at that point, they may need consular assistance. And so Canadian diplomats are issuing people with visas, particularly if they are family members of Canadian citizens, helping them get onwards in their travel, perhaps to places, of course, like Canada.
Thank you for this, David. That is the CBC's David Common in Nairobi, Kenya. And we are Also, just learning a little bit more now about a conversation between Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who spoke with the President of Djibouti about the situation in Sudan, saying in a readout of that conversation between the two leaders yesterday that Trudeau expressed deep concern about the conflict in Sudan and its impact on the humanitarian situation and the stability of the region, as well as on the transition to a civilian government in Sudan.